everyone, this is your educator Priyanka Thakur teaching you licenses and welcome you all on our YouTube channel Gurmantra Shikshaka Granth. So today in this video we will study about urine formation, hormonal regulation and countercurrent mechanism. Maybe won't be able to complete the countercurrent mechanism or any one of the topic, but I'll try my best to complete it. If I fail, I will definitely cover it in the next part of excretory system, but for now I'm definitely going to try to complete all these three topics: urine formation, hormonal regulation and countercurrent mechanism. Okay, so you know that to produce urine, nephron and collecting ducts, they will perform three basic functions: glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. Okay, and then comes excretion, which will occur through the urethra, and all the waste will be excreted out of the body. So glomerular filtration occurs in the renal corpuscles. Where it does it occur? It occurs in the renal corpuscles, also known as Bowman capsule. Okay, and tubular secretion occurs all along the renal tubule and the collecting duct. Okay, glomerular filtration occurs when blood enters the glomerulus through the afferent arteriole. Definitely these are the afferent arteriole, and blood is going to enter the glomerulus by the afferent arterioles. So there is glomerular blood pressure, and due to this glomerular blood pressure, water and some solutes such as glucose, amino acids and other nitrogenous waste which are present in the blood, they will move from the glomerulus to the this glomerular capsule, and this is a filtration process. Why? Because not proteins or any other formed elements are passed from this glomerular capillaries to the glomerular capsule. So this is called ultrafiltration. Like, no proteins and formed elements will be filtered. They won't be able to pass through the membrane, and this filtrability of solute is inversely related to their size. Okay, so when we say the renal fluid does not contain any cells or any proteins. Okay, the volume of fluid filtered by renal capsule is much larger than in other capillaries. Okay, this is because of three reasons. Glomerular capillaries, they have large surface area for filtration because they are quite long, and they have a porous membrane, and glomerular capillary blood pressure is high, and because the efferent arteriole is smaller in diameter than the afferent arteriole, that's why glomerular capillary blood pressure is high. When we talk about glomerular filtration rate, so what is glomerular filtration rate? The amount of filtrate that is formed in the renal capsule, okay, that is formed in the renal capsule, all the renal capsule of both the kidney per minute is called glomerular filtration rate. Glomerular filtration, if we talk about a healthy person, is about approximately 125 ml per minute. It becomes 7.5 liter per hour and then 180 liter per day. But 99% of this filtrate is reabsorbed. Only approximately 1% is released out, excreted out, which is roughly equivalent to 1 to 1.5 liters. Okay. So glomerular filtration rate is mainly determined by net filtration pressure and glomerular capillary filtration coefficient. Okay, I'll tell you this from a different diagram. You will study about the reabsorption. See, this is a net filtration rate. It depends upon glomerular hydrostatic pressure, capsular hydrostatic pressure, and blood colloid osmotic pressure. Glomerular hydrostatic pressure is it forces the plasma present in the glomerulus to move into the Bowman's capsule or glomerular capsule. Okay, so this is the pressure in the glomerular capillaries. Okay, and this is the capsular hydrostatic pressure, which is 15. This is the pressure present in the capsule due to already present fluid in the capsule. It will oppose the flow of filtrate. Similarly, the osmotic pressure that is present in the plasma due to proteins and other factors will also oppose. It will also oppose the movement of filtrate into the movement of fluid from capillaries to capsule. So both of these forces will be opposing the movement of fluid from capillaries to capsule, and this glomerular capillaries hydrostatic pressure will be promoting the same. this is 55, both of these 40 become 45, so we have net filtration rate which is 10 mmHg. Okay, if we talk about regulation of glomerular filtration rate, so it is under the neural control, it is also under renal autoregulation, and it is also under hormonal regulation. Okay, first I will tell you about how these renal, see, this is also under renal control. I will tell you how renal autoregulation of glomerular filtration takes place. It occurs due to two things. One is myogenic constriction, other one is tubuloglomerular feedback. I'll tell you about myogenic constriction first. Okay, efferent arterioles, you cannot see efferent arteriole, I will show you this one again. Okay, this is the efferent arteriole, you can see afferent arteriole and efferent arteriole. Myogenic constriction of afferent arterioles occurs due to the ability of smooth muscles to sense and respond to an increase in arterial pressure. Okay, as the blood pressure increases, glomerular filtration rate also rises because renal blood flow increases. However, the elevated blood flow pressure increases, it will stretch the wall of afferent arterioles. When there is more glomerular filtration rate or more glomerular pressure, blood pressure, it will stretch the afferent arteriole, and due to the stretch in afferent arteriole, smooth muscle fibers will respond and they will contract, and these smooth muscle fibers then become narrow, and their lumen, arterioles lumen mainly become narrow. Smooth muscle fiber contract and they narrow the arterioles lumen. As a result, arteriole lumen is now constricted and there will be decrease in the blood flow, and ultimately glomerular filtration rate will be decreased. Opposite will happen. If the blood flow is low, afferent arteriole will be dilated and blood pressure will be increased. This happens because now smooth muscles, they will not constrict. In fact, they will relax. If smooth muscle cells will relax, afferent arterioles will be dilated and glomerular filtration rate will be increased. Okay, another one is tubuloglomerular feedback. Okay, so what happened in this case? The kidneys have a feedback mechanism that link changes in sodium chloride concentration in the distal tubule. Actually, macula densa, I have already told you all these things. Macula densa are the cells which act as a sensor. Okay, if the chloride concentration is high in the distal tubule, it is the indicative of increased glomerular filtration. If sodium chloride concentration is low in the distal tubule, it is the indicator of decreased glomerular filtration rate. So decrease in sodium chloride concentration initiate a signal from the macula densa that will cause the dilation of afferent arterioles, and once the afferent arterioles are dilated, they will help to return glomerular filtration rate towards normal. And when we talk about hormonal regulation of glomerular filtration, neural, see there is a neural regulation also. You can check out, this is the neural, neural. What happened? All the blood vessels of the kidney, including the afferent and efferent arteriole, they are richly innervated by sympathetic nerve fibers. Okay, activation of renal sympathetic nerve, it will release norepinephrine and epinephrine, which will cause the afferent arteriole to constrict, and after constriction the blood glomerular filtration rate will be decreased. Okay, you got it or you don't got it, you didn't get it. Okay, and other one is like you have another hormonal actions, like let's talk about angiotensin 2. When blood volume and blood pressure decreases, juxtaglomerular cells in the kidney, they will secrete the renin, and then renin goes into the blood. This renin catalyzes the conversion of angiotensin in angiotensin 1, and then angiotensin converting enzyme convert angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is a very good vasoconstrictor, and what it will do, it will vasoconstrict. Okay, it will cause the constriction, and that's why it will decrease the blood pressure. Okay, So angiotensin 2, it decreases the glomerular filtration rate by causing the vasoconstriction of the afferent arterioles, and it can enhance this angiotensin can enhance the reabsorption of sodium chloride and water in the proximal convoluted tubule. It also stimulates the aldosterone. Okay, it also stimulates the aldosterone from adrenal cortex. It also stimulates adrenal cortex to release aldosterone, the hormone which is released from the principal cells. And I'll tell you about principal cells also. And what it will do, it will help the principal cells in the collecting duct to reabsorb more sodium and secrete more potassium. Okay, I think you heard my words very clearly. If you don't, then go back to reverse the video and listen to me again. Okay, you also know about antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone is a vasopressin. Okay, and it is released by posterior part of pituitary and plays a very important role in water absorption by the distal convoluted tubule. This antidiuretic hormone acts on the distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct of the nephron. Antidiuretic hormone, it increases the water reabsorption. What it will do, it will increase the water reabsorption. Okay, antidiuretic hormone increases the water reabsorption in the distal convoluted tubule. Do not forget it. Okay, if we talk about in practical terms, if an individual does not drink much water on a certain day, the posterior lobe of pituitary release antidiuretic hormone, causing more water to be reabsorbed and less urine to form. It means it is causing antidiuresis. Okay, what does it causing? It is causing antidiuresis, right? So on the other hand, if an individual drinks a large amount of water, then pituitary won't release that much antidiuretic hormone, or it in fact antidiuretic hormone will not be released. In this, water is excreted and more urine will be formed. This is your diuresis. Okay, so I hope you understand the function of hormones as well. Now let's talk about reabsorption now. You also understand about glomerular filtration rate. How much is it? It is 125 ml per minute becomes 7.5 per hour and 180 liter per day, but 99% of it is reabsorbed, only 1% is excreted out, which roughly becomes 1 to 1.5 liters per day. So we excrete 1 to 1.5 liters of urine per day. Let's talk about reabsorption now. Okay, we'll be talking about what? Reabsorption now. So I have filtration rate is clear to you now. Okay, so tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion we are talking about now. Tubular reabsorption, this is highly selective process, and see, it retrieves the material back from the tubular fluid and returns them to the bloodstream. Okay, tubular reabsorption, what it will do, it will retrieve the material from the tubular fluid and returns them to the bloodstream. If we talk about glomerular filtration, all the plasma constituent except the plasma protein, these are plasma proteins are not filtered, but all other plasma constituent are filtered, and not even platelets or RBCs are filtered. Okay, so in addition to the waste product and excess material that the body must eliminate, the filtered fluid also contains some nutrients like glucose, amino acids, some ions, okay, such as sodium, potassium, calcium chloride, bicarbonates, and other essential substances. So these essential substances that are filtered are returned back to the body, and this process is called tubular reabsorption. Reabsorption is the second basic function of the nephron and collecting duct. Nephron and collecting duct both performs the function of reabsorption. It is not the function of single like only nephron, it is also the function of what? Collecting duct. Okay, so see now what happened. Now I tell you most of the essential substances are reabsorbed. Fine. So the maximum amount of substance that can be absorbed, the maximum amount of substance that can be absorbed per unit time, that is what we call transport maximum. Okay, this is what we call transport maximum. With the exception of sodium, all the reabsorbed substances have a transport maximum. Okay, see, All the renal tubule consists of epithelial cells that will carry out the reabsorption, but most of the reabsorption occurs in proximal convoluted tubule. See, solutes can be reabsorbed actively or passively. Okay, reabsorption of solute can occur both actively as well as passively. Fine. The largest amount of solute and water are reabsorbed from filtered fluid in this proximal convoluted tubule. From this renal tubule, it will be reabsorbed by the capillaries. Okay, fine. Okay. So this it consists of cuboidal epithelium that will increase the surface area of reabsorption, and almost 65% of sodium chloride, bicarbonate, potassium, and most of the essentially all the filtered glucose and amino acids, okay, these are reabsorbed in this proximal convoluted tubule. Solute reabsorption in the proximal convoluted tubule will promote osmosis. You know, more is the concentration of solute, more is the osmotic pressure, more is the osmotic pressure, more osmotic pressure result in endoosmosis. So water will be reabsorbed with solute. Water will be reabsorbed with solute. Okay, and this is termed as obligatory water reabsorption. This proximal convoluted tubule, this is also the important site of secretion of some organic acids and some bases such as bile salts, oxalate, and etc. Along with this waste, metabolic waste, kidney also secrete many potential harmful drugs or toxin directly through the tubular cells into the tubule, and these are rapidly cleared, and these substances are rapidly cleared from the blood, and blood is now safe for you. Okay, so now you come to know about proximal convoluted tubule secretion. Let's talk about reabsorption and secretion in the loop of Henle. Okay, loop of Henle have a thin descending segment, okay, then thin ascending segment, and then thick ascending segment. Thin descending segment of the loop of Henle, this is highly permeable for water. This segment is highly permeable for water. Okay, and if you don't want to understand it, like you can understand, this segment is highly permeable for water. Okay, and this is moderately permeable to all the solid. You can see it is not that much. This region is highly permeable for water and not for to other solutes. Okay, 20% of filtered water is reabsorbed in this segment of loop of Henle, and almost all of this occurs in the thin descending segment. Okay, ascending segment of loop of Henle, it includes both thin and thick segment, as you know now, and these are virtually impermeable to water, more permeable to sodium. See what happens. Ascending loop of Henle, the thin ascending loop of Henle, this thin ascending loop of Henle has a much lower reabsorption capacity than the thicker one. Okay, 25% of filtered load of sodium chloride and potassium ion are reabsorbed in the loop of Henle, and mostly in the thick ascending segment. And some ions such as calcium ion, bicarbonates ion, and magnesium ion, these are also reabsorbed in the thick ascending segment of loop of Henle. Now let's talk about reabsorption and secretion in the distal convoluted tubule. Now you know most of the water will be reabsorbed from the ascending part, and most of the sodium and like other solutes will be reabsorbed by the descending part of loop of Henle. Reabsorption by and secretion in the distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct. The early distal convoluted tubule, okay, this is the earlier convoluted tubule. It has almost same characters as a thick ascending loop of Henle, and it also reabsorb, like it is going to reabsorb your sodium ions, calcium ion, magnesium ion, but almost impermeable for water. Okay, early distal convoluted tubule has this kind of function. Early distal convoluted tubule is almost impermeable for water and urea. Okay, and late distal convoluted tubule and cortical connecting tubule and late distal convoluting tubule, they have two types of cells. I told you, I will tell you about principal cells. They have principal cells and intercalated cells. The principal cell will absorb, see, principal cell will reabsorb water, sodium. Principal cell will be present here, they will reabsorb sodium and from the lumen and secrete potassium in the lumen. But sodium will be secreted out. Reabsorbed from the lumen, and potassium will be secreted in the lumen. But the intercalated cell will reabsorb potassium. Intercalary cell is going to reabsorb potassium and bicarbonate ions from the lumen, and they secrete hydrogen ions into the lumen. So permeability of late distal convoluted tubule and cortical collecting duct to water is controlled by concentration of antidiuretic hormone. High is vasopressin, more permeable are these tubular segment for water. But if no vasopressin is there, they will be impermeable for water. So this special characteristics provide an important mechanism for controlling the degree of dilution or concentration of the urine. Okay. Reabsorption of water occurs at medullary collecting duct, and the reabsorption of water is controlled by vasopressin. This also plays a role in the secretion of hydrogen ions, and these hydrogen ions will play a key role in regulating acid-base valence. Okay, it will help in regulating acid-base valence. So now you know what ions will be absorbed in proximal tubule, and then loop of Henle, and then in distal convoluted tubule. I have also told you in my previous videos about atrial natriuretic peptide. But before this, I will tell you about mechanism of action of antidiuretic hormone. Again, whenever antidiuretic hormone is present in the blood, it will bind with its receptor, and these receptors are found in the membrane of distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct. Okay, this binding of antidiuretic hormone to its its receptors present on the cells of distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct, it helps activate the synthesis of cyclic AMP, which act as a secondary messenger within the cell, and this cyclic AMP increases the insertion of water channel aquaporin 2 into the membrane. That's why when ADH are present, these are more permeable, and when ADH are absent, these are not that permeable. What about atrial natriuretic peptide? We will also come to know about atrial natriuretic peptide. Okay, so atrial natriuretic peptide. If the blood flow increases in the atria of the heart, then atrial natriuretic peptide are released. This peptide, it causes dilation. I have already told you these things. Okay, these cause the vasodilation, and the increased vasodilation means blood pressure. This peptide can cause vasodilation, dilation of blood vessels, and thereby decreases the blood pressure. Increased level of this peptide in turn inhibit the reabsorption of sodium and water by the renal tubule. Remember, if this peptide is too much, okay, if this peptide is too much, then it will inhibit the reabsorption of sodium and water by the renal tubule, especially in the collecting duct, and decrease sodium and water reabsorption will increase urinary excretion, which help to return blood volume back towards normal. Okay, so now you know how atrial natriuretic peptide are going to function. Okay, what about urine transportation, storage and elimination? What about regulation of blood volume, blood pressure and blood osmolarity? See, kidneys adjust blood volume by conserving and eliminating water in the urine. If blood volume increases, then blood pressure increases, and if blood volume decreases, blood pressure decreases. So kidney also help regulate blood pressure. They secrete enzyme renin. You see the function of renin, how it will activate angiotensin, how aldosterone will be activated, how renin will cause increase in the blood pressure, and kidney maintain blood osmolarity. How? By separately regulating loss of water and loss of solute in the urine. Kidney maintain a relatively constant blood osmolarity. It's close to 300 milliosmoles per liter. Okay, milliosmoles per liter. If we talk about see, this is the countercurrent mechanism. Fine. So if we talk about urine transportation, storage and elimination, this is the countercurrent mechanism, but I will tell you about this mechanism in a later section. Not today. I'll tell you about this mechanism in later section. See, okay. So you must know about all the hormonal role. Also remember urine transportation and about storage and elimination. How much urine can be excreted out at an average? 1 to 1.5 liters, you know that, okay? And in this, 25 to 30 gram of urea is excreted out per day. So from collecting duct, urine drains into the renal pelvis. So you know about kidneys, you have seen the structure of kidneys. I have told you about the renal pelvis, okay? So from collecting duct, the urine is drained into the renal pelvis, and from renal pelvis it is drained into the ureter and then to the urinary bladder, and finally urethra, it is thrown out. And in female, you know that there are two openings. In male there is only single opening of for discharge of semen as well as excretion of urine. The discharge of urine from the urinary bladder is what we call micturition, and it is also known as urination or voiding. Okay, so what is the first step involved in micturition? First, the urinary bladder fills progressively until the tension in its wall rises. Okay, and then when the tension rises, there are some nervous reflexes. These reflexes are known as micturition reflexes, and these reflexes will amplify the bladder, and this will cause a conscious desire to urinate. Okay, micturition is fundamentally a spinal reflex facilitated and inhibited by micturition center, and these centers are present in the cerebral cortex or brain stem. Okay, so when the volume of urine in urinary bladder is approximately 200 to 400 ml, there is a pressure on the urinary bladder that will cause sensory stretch receptors, that will increase the sensory stretch receptors, and these receptors will then transmit nerve impulses into spinal cord, and then these impulses will propagate to the micturition center, and they will trigger a nervous reflex, and this is what we call micturition reflex. What are the normal characteristics of urine? See, you know about this hydrostatic pressure, and what are the all the urine will be collected out from here to the renal pelvis, and from renal pelvis to the ureter, from ureter to the urinary bladder, and finally it will excreted out through the your urethra. Okay, so I will later tell you about the chemical composition of urine, and what about your counter current mechanism. For now, you can check out this, that in counter current mechanism, you will see the function of nephron and vasa recta. The counter current mechanism will occur in between these two. I hope you understand this thing for today. In next video, I will be telling about characteristics of normal urine. Along with this, I will tell you about formation of concentrated urine and counter current mechanism. But that's all for today. For more info, for preparing for CSIR NET JRF June 2021, you can take the subscription of Unacademy. And if you want to prepare seriously, then you should take this subscription. And even the detail is of paid classes on your screen. You can get 10% off from this by using the referral code Neha, which is the referral code of Neha Tanisha ma'am. Go there, follow her, and along with this, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon. If you want to join us anywhere else, you can click the description box. There you will get the links, and on a single click you will be there with us on our different platform. That's all for today. Thank